Chapter 1 is fairly straightforward, but there are a few tips that I want to go over with you. First of all, make sure that you are naming each of your layers with a unique name. Even if you were to name something like Circle 1, Circle 2, Circle 3, that doesn't really tell us what's on that layer. So instead, being a bit more descriptive, like large circle, bottom circle, and top circle, definitely lets us understand what's on that layer. Now, one of the problems people have when they're working in Flash is they'll accidentally click on a layer, draw some artwork on the layer, and they actually meant to put that artwork on a different layer. And so then when they try to animate or get things to work correctly, it won't because they're on the wrong layer. So what you need to make sure you're doing is using the show hide feature in Flash so that you can show and hide each layer at a time and scrub through it just to make sure you see what's on that layer. And that way it helps you kind of to investigate what should be on that layer and then move things accordingly if they're on the wrong layer. So on this bottom circle layer, if we scrub through it, that's the only thing that's on there. And the top circle layer, that's the only thing that's on there. Now another thing is when you're on a layer that has a motion tween and it's something that actually moved, then it's probably going to have a motion path. And with this motion path, you can kind of see the arc a little bit because it is an orange and it's easy to see on this dark background. But when I'm on the bottom circle layer, that motion path you can barely see here because it's a purple. You can see it here, but not on the dark background. In order to fix that, you can double click on this icon here, choose a color, and click OK. And now it's a little bit easier to see. But just realize that you can only see the motion path if you're clicked on that particular layer. Now when you're doing Chapter 1 Project Builder, make sure that you move the circles all the way off the stage. If you were to end it right here, this is a constantly looping movie, so if you were to end it right here, then it would move across, stop here, and then automatically pop up right over here. And that doesn't really make visual sense. So make sure you're moving them completely off the stage. Now, in order to test this movie, when you're in here, you can scrub the playhead so you can kind of see what's happening, or you can hit Return or Enter on your keyboard and it'll play it once, or the best bet is to do Control Enter or Command Return on a Mac, and that will play it. And this Flash automatically will loop your timeline unless you tell it not to, so that's why it's looping. And this again is why you want it to go completely off the stage. Now when you do create this Flash file, this is an FLA file, and you test out this movie, all of a sudden it converts it to a SWF file so it can play it. Now when you go into the folder that you saved this project in, now you have two files, the sample chapter 1.fla file and the SWF file. Turn in both of these files to me into the Dropbox, because let's say you were to add your name here in a certain kind of font. If I don't have that font on my computer, then it's going to look a little bit weird to me. But by sending the SWF file, it shows me exactly what you saw on your machine, so I can kind of forgive what's happening here if I see weird font that's happening, because I can see what you intended with your SWF. So make sure you send me both files. Now this recover file that pops up is, let's say you have your project open for quite a while and you haven't saved it. Flash knows that you're going to get frustrated if it closes and it didn't save it or something happens. And so it creates this recover file. And it should pop up with a question asking you if you want that recover file. But you don't have to keep that recover file. Just make sure you're saving every 10-15 minutes to make sure that doesn't happen. Now a couple other things. Make sure that you understand what each part of the timeline or the visual differences in the timeline. So when I'm on this frame, it's just a plain gray frame, and this is just what we call a regular frame. And when it's gray, it has content on it. Something is on this frame. These are empty frames over here. They have no content on them. And when it's gray, it means there's absolutely no animation. And that's because it's just this background layer. Now I could have made the stage color, I could have changed it here, but that actually changes everything. So I don't generally change the stage color that way. I just put a rectangle in the background, and I like to put a gradient or whatever, and that makes it easier to work with. So I've locked all the layers just to make sure I don't damage them as I'm going through here, but other things you need to be aware of: when it's blue, it means that there's a motion tween there. So there is some sort of animation. And anytime you see a filled in shape like a circle or a diamond, then that means it's a keyframe. And again, a keyframe is a change in a change. Something is changed. So as you can see with each of these keyframes, this one is the big circle. Click here and it gets a little bit bigger. Oops. Click here, smaller, much bigger, and a little bit smaller. So that's saying that there has been a change between all those points. Last, if something happens, like here, this white box, this empty white box is telling you this is a stop frame. So it's trying to tell you that the background stops here. So let's say at some point when you're working through this, you do something weird like this. And all of a sudden, the rest of your animation lasts to the 24th frame and you test it out. And then you get this weird blink. Oops, and that keeps happening. Get this weird blink where everything goes away. And that's just because you have extra frames here where we're just seeing the background and not any of your animation. So what we can do is click on this frame, hold the shift key, click on the last frame, right click, and then we can do clear frames or remove frames, which is what I'll do. And that takes it back to normal. So don't forget that right click, because anywhere you click, as you can see here, you have a different options for the tween. If I right click here, we don't have any tween options or remove tween or copy tween because there's not a tween right here. So don't forget that right click key in order to keep your timeline pretty clean.